My story tonight is inspired by a Scottish band who um, is called Silly Wizard. Some of you may have heard of them, and the song that it was based on is called The Fisherman's Lament. But the story is older and more timeless than that, I feel, and I hope that you will think so too. By the storm-torn shoreline, a woman is standing, the spray strung like jewels in her hair. But those jewels were nothing compared to the diamonds that were running down her cheeks. She had been standing and raging at the sea for who knows how long, until her voice and her heart were sore. Come away from the water, Katie Shea. Not this time, Mother Maggie. Come away from the water and sit by me here on the rocks this instant. I'd have thought you would have been more sympathetic now that we've both lost our men to shipwreck. Where Katie's Robbie had gone out last Wednesday, and they'd heard she'd gone down with all hands. For she had come down to condemn that wild ocean for the murderous loss of her man, whose boat sailed out on Wednesday morning. And it's feared she's gone down with all hands. All Katie Shea could think of was her Robbie, his beautiful blue-black hair, the sea green eyes, the color of the ocean in a storm, all lost, all gone. I said, come away from the water, Katie Shea. No, with both of us losing our men to shipwreck, I know you know how I feel. Katie Shea, I said I lost your father to the ocean. I never told you he was on a boat. And now Katie Shea did turn around, and she looked at her mother and said, whatever can you mean by that? Come and sit beside me. And so, as she had done all her life, Katie Shea walked away from the water and clambered up on the rocks to sit next to Mother Maggie. She had never been allowed to swim. She had never been allowed to put so much as a toe in the ocean or a foot upon a boat her whole life. It was strange enough for a girl growing up in a seaside fishing village. But since she had married her Robbie last year, a sailor, it was stranger still. Tell me what you mean, Mother. I told you I had lost your father. It started when I was a girl, younger than you are now. There were no young people in our village at that time. I didn't have any friends to play with or to date, but I was never lonely. For every day I'd come down to this beach and I would swim out to the point and back, racing against the seals. The same group would meet me every day and we would play. And there was one who was larger and stronger and sleeker than all the rest. He had these beautiful brown eyes that if you looked into them, I swear he was trying to communicate with you. He was my favorite. He was my best friend. Then one night, midsummer, the moon was full and high, and I couldn't sleep. So I thought I'd come down to the beach and go for a swim. But as I got closer and closer, I could hear music. Men's voices singing. And as I got down to the beach, there was a circle of young men singing and dancing and clad in nothing but moonlight. I crouched down behind these rocks and watched and listened. And there was one young man in the middle of the circle who was taller and stronger and sleeker than all the rest. And when he sang, I swore it sounded like it was for my ears alone. I don't know how long I hid behind these rocks, Katie Shea. But when at last they stopped singing, each one of those young men picked up a seal skin from a pile on the beach I had not seen and ran down to the end of the jetty and threw the fur over his head. And I swear to you, Katie Shea, it was a young man that leapt into the air, but a seal that broke the water over and over and over again until there was just one young man left. One who was tall and strong and sleek. I stood up and he came over to me and I looked into his eyes that were deep and brown and somehow familiar. Oh, my heart stopped. 9 months later, you were born, Katie Shea. Your father stayed with me the whole time and told me his story. He was one of the Selkie, the most powerful of all the Fae, who spent part of their time walking on land as humans, and the rest of the time in the ocean, in a seal form. And he was not just any Selkie, but the son of the king and the queen of the sea, the most powerful of all, who had to stay as seals full time. He told me that he would have to go back soon and that he'd have to take you as well, for you were Selkie. But I couldn't let him take you, Katie Shea. I wouldn't let him take my babe. And when at last he saw I was serious, he said, "Oh, you must never let her put so much as a toe in the ocean or a foot upon a boat, or the king and the queen of the sea will know who she is, and they'll claim her." He came back every year with a bigger and bigger seal skin, begging me to let you visit, to let you come with him, but I couldn't let you leave me, Katie Shea. And so last year, when you married Robbie, we had a terrible fight, a storm, but I still couldn't let you go. He's come back today. If you look out at the end of the jetty, that seal there is your father. And he's told me that the Selkie saw your Robbie's ship go down and they were able to save him. And only their magic is keeping him alive. They hope to be able to keep him alive until you can see him to say goodbye. But to see him, you'll have to leave me, Katie Shea. And Mother Maggie held out a sealskin. And Katie took it from her and hugged her mother fiercely without saying a word. And just like in the story, she ran to the end of the jetty and threw the fur over her head. And she was a woman when she leapt, and a seal when she broke the water. And she began to follow the cream-colored seal ahead of her. She thought must be her father. When she thought to turn around and look at the shore, her mother was just a speck. And the next time she looked, she couldn't see the shore at all. And she put all of her heart into swimming. And when even this form grew tired, there was an island up ahead of the two seals, and they beached on the shore and shed their skins. And the man that Katie Shea knew must be her father pointed to where two large seals were guarding a man, a body, laying on the shore, his blue-black hair shining. Katie ran to see him, and the seals barred her way. I know who you are. Get out of my way. I must see my Robbie. And they parted. She took up his hand was so cold, but his eyes fluttered open. Oh, those sea green eyes, the color of the ocean in a storm. I know I must be dying now to see your beautiful face, Katie Shea. Oh no, I won't let you go. And she whirled on the Selkie. If you are the most powerful of all the Fae, there must be a way for you to keep him alive. I do not care what the cost is. I'm asking you to do it. And her father cried out and said, Katie Shea, you mustn't. She said, I do not care what price must be paid. And as the words came out of her mouth, a storm began to swirl around the island. The winds began to build. And her father gave her a knife and said, take your sealskin and cut a patch out of the leather just the size of your hand. And Katie began to cut. And when she cut into the seal skin, she looked down where she felt the pain over her own heart. And there was a well of blood. She began to understand, but she cut through the skin until she had that patch. And while she'd been cutting, the other three had been as well. And they laid them one on top of the other, all four. Father said, lay those four on top of your Robbie's heart, and then press your own on top of him. She laid them down on his cold chest, and she embraced him and put her own sore heart on top of his. And now the storm began to rage in earnest, and the waves around the island started to raise up 3 feet, 4, 7, 10. And they clapped over the heads of all who stood there. And when Katie woke up, she was floating in the shallow water. And there next to her was a seal with blue-black fur. And when he looked at her, his eyes were sea green, the color of the ocean in a storm. Yes, said her father, that's your Robbie. I must thank the king and the queen of the sea. Where are they? Oh, Katie Shea, It took all of our magic to make the transformation. You and Robbie are the king and queen of the sea now. And with that, her father breathed his last. And Katie and her Robbie dove underneath the waves to explore their new kingdom. By the storm-torn shoreline, a woman is standing. Mother Maggie has come down to the beach every day since her daughter left, but today is different. She's going to swim out to the end of the point and back with the little baby seals who are making pearls, breaking the waves near the shore. As she glides into the water, she thinks to herself, it is good to be a grandmother.